I know that it was called the Women's Faculty Caucus initially. It was restricted to faculty, and I know it goes back to at least 1973, but I suspect it goes farther back than that.
Let me talk from the perspective of someone who came from the outside in 1986, in the fall of 1986. We met in the Dodge room of Phi Beta Kappa, and I walked into this room. Now remember, I was an outsider, I really didn't know anybody. I walked in and there was a small semicircle of women, I would say under 30 women. And I said to myself, oh dear God, is this the most of the women faculty at William and Mary? And it was. It probably was only a few months or within the year before I came, they had sent a memo to the new provost and said, we want to meet with you, here are the issues that we have. It became, in my own mind, really the foundation of what all of us had to fight for in terms of women's rights at William and Mary. So that memo was a very important, and that was Anne Reid and Glenn George from the law school. So even from early days, women from different units of the campus did come together. They were coming together, they were saying, if we don't unite and really fight for these issues as a caucus or an entity, we are not going to get anywhere that we want to be. And I'll give you one example of their strategic, what I considered their strategic brilliance. They had no membership, and they were very, very explicit about that. They did not want anybody to pay dues. They did not want to have lists in any public way of members. They were protecting the fact that they always wanted to be able to say, we speak for all the women.
One of the real successes, I think, of that Women's Faculty Caucus was the establishment of the Child Care Center on campus.
The big issue then was whether we could ever get a child care center, because we didn't have one, and nor were there many resources in town. Now there's many more resources, and now we finally have the child care center. But it took a lot of persuasion and lobbying and persuading the fundraisers that this was something worth funding and seeking and finding a donor.
It was a woman board member who gave money. That was the beginning and the end of that. It was wonderful.
So one person.
What, Sarah Gore Ives. Once she committed that money, that really got the board rolling. But I will tell you that the Child Care Center at least for the first 10 to 15 years, was on a shoestring budget.
I know female faculty members here who actually worked as director of the Child Care Center when they were between directors, when they were trying to recruit directors. So there's been a long-term passion for this issue of childcare on campus. Of course, more recently, making that childcare affordable and making it available to all women employees at the college, not just faculty, has been an issue as well.
Dating back to the time I first arrived, there was no parental leave policy, period, anywhere. And anybody who became pregnant had to negotiate whatever they were able to negotiate with their department chairs. And some department chairs were very enlightened and very accommodating, and some were just jerks. And it took a long time to persuade whoever we needed to persuade that we needed one consistently uniform parental leave policy, and that it didn't depend on the good graces of your department chair, and it was available to everybody, and everyone knew what the expectations were. That was a long haul, maybe a decade.
When we think about the leave issue, it has improved for families on campus recently. And so there's been evolution with that. And I really believe that thinking about that started with the Women's Network. We might not have gotten exactly what we asked for, but the conversation has evolved so that now for families who are on campus, both parents can take leave. Whereas before that wasn't the case, and there's a realization that the leave doesn't belong to the baby. The leave belongs to the parents. And so if they choose to both take leave sequentially, they can do that.
You know, the old argument that men were always had their mentors who prepared them for tenure and for promotion and so forth, and that women were often certainly not clueless, but they were not helped to the same extent as men were. I know when I was the vice provost in recent years, I instituted a series of workshops, tenure preparation, promotion workshops, and we were very, very explicit about all of the issues that women and minority faculty should be aware of. They were well received, yeah. And that was I always felt myself that was something, a contribution that I felt very good about. Those workshops were good.
As we were getting ready for our year, over the summer we had some conversations about the tone of the caucus and the fact, as has happened cyclically over the years, that attendance was falling off, and many of the younger faculty women didn't seem to think that the Women's Caucus had anything to offer them. And we talked about unilaterally changing the name to the Women's Network, to kind of update it, to drag it out of the 70s, to make it seem more useful to younger faculty and less contentious. And so we did. We didn't convene a meeting or have a committee or do a focus group. We just did it.
The thing that I remember feeling was that the Women's Caucus was more politically oriented, always taking a position, getting change, policy, whatever. And the possibility of having a network sounded so much more inclusive and friendly and open and welcoming. And I think especially for professional staff who are a little bit intimidated sometimes by faculty, it was a very warm way of saying, the Women's Network is for you too. And even though we'll continue to deal with issues, and indeed we did, it's not going to be just an issue-oriented caucus with taking positions and doing advocacy or activism.
And the caucus had been around for almost 20 years with that name, and we thought it was just time for a refresher.
The movement towards broadening our constituency, the movement towards embracing all female employees at William & Mary was actually a much tougher sell than I thought it would be. So I started the conversation by sort of gathering together an executive committee. We sent out a survey to all female employees. One thing that survey really showed us is that a lot of the issues that classified hourly and operational staff were dealing with were the exact same issues that faculty and professionals were dealing with or had dealt with in the last couple of decades. It was eerie. It was eerily similar. And so I, along with the members of the XCOM, really pushed this idea that we're fighting the same battles, and wouldn't it make more sense if we were fighting them together, right? And so we had scheduled the forum, and we got nice representation and participation from not just the faculty and professionals, but also the hourly operational and classified staff. And from there, I actually went one-on-one and talked to a lot of the women that had been involved in the Faculty Women's Caucus when it was established in the 60s or 70s. And I got pushback. There was a general feeling that we needed to keep it small and dynamic. It needed to be able to respond quickly to issues. Faculty issues were fundamentally different from staff issues. And it was interesting. By that time, I was co-chairing with Justine Okerson, who was in the Office of Admissions, and both she and I felt, and the executive committee in general really felt, that from an ethical and moral standpoint, we needed to expand. That part of the reason that this earlier generation really felt like these issues were different was because they weren't necessarily talking to staff on a regular basis. They hadn't been part of these conversations. They hadn't been part of these debates. And so the idea of the forum was to bring everyone together and really try to show, to demonstrate that we're all in this together and we're facing the same sorts of issues. And at least 3 of those women that I had talked to one-on-one came up to me after the forum to tell me that they, having spoken with a lot of these women, they 100% agreed, and it was the right thing to do, and it was the way forward. And that was a huge moment for me, feeling like I could sort of bridge the history of the Women's Faculty Caucus with the future of where William & Mary was going. It was exciting.
I came on board when it was expanded to any women employees on campus. Before I had tagged along to a welcome reception with somebody that was a professional staff member. It's like, oh, I would love to join this, but I'm not allowed because I'm an operational staff member. So once that got opened up, I think we really were able to diversify.
And then we also then extended it to graduate students, right? Because we also saw a lot of graduate students were obviously working on campus, we shared a lot of the same concerns. One of the things that I'm most proud of, like in terms of that expanding the inclusion, was really figuring out how can we include facilities staff to our events, because like to the communication piece, it's a little bit more challenging to reach the facility staff because their work hours are often very different. Most of them might not have access to emails that all of us depend on. I think it would be easy to say, oh, that's just too difficult. We're not going to try to figure out a way how could we reach them. But part of it is just being creative. I think like putting up flyers in the break room, working closely with facilities supervisors to help spread the word. And so we've been able to offer some events that's specifically for facilities staff. There's obviously more, that we can do, but I think it is a testament to how creative we can be, and also really committing, to supporting, all groups on campus.
I think just seeing the power that the network has, it wasn't really something that I was expecting when I joined, and then seeing that our women's network is then connected to the Virginia Women's Network that has their own professional development opportunities and conferences and things like that. So there's a lot of focus that it doesn't even have to be just insular to William & Mary and women in higher education, that it can easily expand out very, very quickly into all of Virginia or to the US as a whole. That's something that I really value with the Women's Network, is that it is every single level of person in terms of administrative things. Like you can talk to Ginger Ambler, or we have people that come to events that are facilities folks, and everywhere in between. So it's nice to have that opportunity to talk to everybody and get everybody's opinion.
The forum that we do every 2 years is really important in allowing people from across the university at all levels, as you say, bring key issues and share them with us, so that we can leave from that forum, we can finish that forum and look at all of those issues that were brought up and say, okay, here's our agenda for the next 2 years. Here are the things that we want to address, that we want to tackle to improve the lives of people on campus.
So one of my fondest memories of being a co-chair was that Sandra Day O'Connor, who was chancellor at the time, agreed to come and do a session just for the Women's Network. And I had the opportunity to facilitate the dialogue with her. When I think about my involvement as a leader, one of the wonderful experiences is to meet and talk with amazing women, to include our chancellor. It was a wonderful experience, and it was a very intimate gathering. We gathered in the Dodge Room of Phi Beta Kappa Hall, which is not a huge space. And maybe 80 women sitting right on the floor together with Justice O'Connor and hearing her experiences.
I think there's a level of respect, for our group because we are not afraid to speak up. And we work hard, right? We work hard with different campus partners. Oftentimes then we do get invited to the table.
For different reasons at different times, we always had access to the provost. Provost always came to us. A series of provosts made themselves available to, and for many years subsidized the Women's Caucus. So we were always treated professionally.
And with respect.
And that's true. I mean, they didn't duck out on either having a serious conversation in some cases or just having a cocktail. Either way, they were happy to be present for the Women's Network.
We had regular meetings with the president at least once a semester. We met with the provost, and in fact, both the president and provost would do an annual forum for the Women's Network where they would come and basically have a Q&A with any campus women who were to come. So that was a signature program at the time and was something that I think demonstrated active support from the leadership.
I have a really vivid memory of when her presidency was announced. So I have a very female-oriented lab. I actually have affirmative action in my lab for male students because I have so many female scientists in my lab. And 3 of us were watching the press conference where they announced that she was going to be president. And I turned around and I was embarrassed because I got all teary-eyed. I turned around and all 3 students were crying. All 4 of us watching this screen, just weeping because it's been such a long time coming.
I want her to be a successful president, period. I want her to bring her voice, her experience, her perspective to the needs of this place, and for the community to see her not as our woman president, but as our president. 325 years is a long time to have had only male leaders of the institution. So I don't mean to downplay the significance of her being a woman. I think it's really important.
Symbolism matters. Seeing women in positions where we have not seen women before, it's very important. It makes a difference. It sends a message.
When you take a look at the history of the network as you're doing, there's evidence that it's kind of a building thing, and no one person needs to take or worry about taking credit for anything because we all kind of built on each other's efforts. And I think it's evolved in a way that we hope takes you forward in ways that meet your personal and professional needs at the college, because that's really important.
As long as we have women on campus, I think there's a role for the network. Even if it's just to connect people. I mean, our opening reception has been happening as long as I've been here, and that's quite a long time now, 20-some years. So the opportunity to welcome new faculty and staff into our midst, to help them get to know people, to whether it's provide formal or informal mentoring, I think all those things are important, and they speak to creating a sense of community. So that's a really important role to me for the network.
Everybody has something to contribute. Everyone has their network. Everyone has that skill set. Where 5 years ago, I never would have said I would be sitting in a chair saying I'm a co-chair of the Women's Network, because I'm like, no, I'm a web developer and I like not talking to people and I'll communicate with you on the computer and that's it. But through the Women's Network and the opportunities that it's given me, like you end up seeing a lot more potential in yourself than you ever really thought was there.
I have to say my time on Women's Network has probably been the most positive and enjoyable service I've done at William & Mary. There's something very special about getting these bright, powerful, passionate women in one room and seeing what they can do together. I always looked forward to our monthly meetings. I always looked forward to seeing those survey data, to scheduling and attending those programming events. So in the end, it was a joy to serve.
The women that I met, the women faculty that I met in 1986 were pioneers. They really were pioneers. As I told you, I felt that day just like, wow, there are not many of them and they're really beleaguered, but they were pioneers and they were smart and they were tough.